You tell me, does this look like someone whose assets have been frozen, who's been forced into bankruptcy, who has little control over his own finances? This is Ontario's self-described crypto king, Aiden Pleterski, infamous for driving a lime green Lamborghini and traveling on private jets after being forced by the courts to declare bankruptcy last year. More than 100 people gave him money to invest in crypto, and the vast majority of that money is missing.
CBC News has received a video of Aiden Pleterski visibly beaten and apologizing for losing investors' money. We've also learned 5 men are charged with kidnapping him.
When the money was coming in, I was failing to tell people that I'd lost a lot of it.
Pleterski's collection of luxury cars and his Jacob & Co. luxury watch have been seized and sold. But what about the rest? How can someone who's been accused of breach of contract, fraudulent misrepresentation, civil fraud, misappropriation of funds, conversion, and unjust enrichment just keep on going like nothing ever happened? Pleterski says he first started trading crypto when he was just 16, earning big on an early Bitcoin investment. He claimed his investments were doing so well, friends and family started asking him to invest their money too. In 2021, he founded the company AP Private Equity Limited, AP being his own initials.
He appeared to live a very lavish lifestyle. He rented a $45,000 a month waterfront home in Burlington, Ontario. He owned nearly a dozen luxury cars, including a Lamborghini and 2 McLarens.
And he dubbed himself the Crypto King in a series of paid ads resembling news articles, like this one in Forbes. Aiden is quickly becoming the face of young, successful investors and entrepreneurs everywhere, exemplifying what it means to create your own success story in the digital age. And investors bought in for millions of dollars.
The 24-year-old boasted about his lavish lifestyle and caught the eye of investors, who gave him tens of millions to invest in cryptocurrency and foreign exchange.
Court records show he entered into all sorts of contracts, some of them formal, some under the table, promising to generate massive returns. One woman told CBC her contract with Pleterski was for a 70-30 split, meaning she'd receive 70% of all profits and Pleterski would take a 30% cut. That's a big fee, but he had big goals, 10 to 20% growth every 2 weeks. I mean, to see 20% growth a year is a dynamite investment, never mind every 2 weeks, but he went even further than that, guaranteeing her initial investment. So no matter what happened to the market, he said he could pay it back. But here's the thing, Pleterski's not a financial advisor. He wasn't registered with the Ontario Securities Commission or any regulating body. He has no background in finance or business. He says his record keeping mostly consisted of text messages, and at the time, he was 23 years old.
And the reality in this case is that most of these investors found him to be a legitimate investor because of the backing that was online, this facade that was created of essentially the Doogie Howser of investing.
Online, Pleterski really flaunted his wealth, regularly posting reels like this, showing off luxury cars, lavish vacations, private jets, designer clothing. He did make some payments back to investors when they wanted to cash out, according to court documents. A few investors say, he also sent them pictures of what looked like a foreign exchange, crypto trading account with over $311 million in it. But when one investor decided to do a little digging, according to the court docs, he met with a rep from that trading platform directly, showed them the supposed account balance, and he was told, no. There is no account on this platform with that amount of money.
But last year, things started to unravel, and now authorities are trying to track down millions that are unaccounted for through bankruptcy proceedings.
Legal action against Pleterski started last summer with a single plaintiff, a realtor, who invested $4.6 million in Pleterski's company. And pretty soon, word started to spread.
There were a lot of other people out there, a lot of other investors who were all coming to the same realization that that they had been defrauded. And what we told our clients is that in these Ponzi cases, unfortunately, you're all victims, but you shouldn't be fighting against each other. It should be a collective action.
The case soon ballooned to include over 150 investors looking to recover more than $40 million from Pleterski by forcing him into bankruptcy.
The victims of this scheme will have to basically get their recoveries through the bankruptcy process.
Bankruptcy, in theory, would allow for all of Pleterski's assets to be taken and sold, with the proceeds being returned to investors. It's not a way of making them whole again, but it's something. The only question was, how much could they realistically get back?
When you have a party who's bankrupt, but who's not cooperating with the trustee, not disclosing all of his assets, you really have to, you have a much harder time as a bankruptcy trustee, because you have to basically find what the bankrupt is hiding.
So far, in this case, the trustee has been able to recoup around $3 million for these plaintiffs, mostly by seizing some of Pleterski's most lavish assets. 11 cars, including his infamous lime green Lamborghini, a Ferrari, and a super rare McLaren Senna, as well as some luxury designer items. Pleterski also apparently gave a good chunk of money to his family and friends, a few million at least. The trustee's been able to recover some of that and has put a freeze on all of his accounts. That's just the money they can reach.
I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't want to or mean to ruin anybody's life.
After he was forced into bankruptcy, he was kidnapped in December of last year. Angry investors, according to court records. They allegedly picked him up in downtown Toronto, beat him up, held him for a few days, and then let him go. But not before giving an explanation, some of which his lawyer said he was forced to say by his kidnappers.
The money was coming in, I was failing to tell people that I'd lost a lot of it, which caused me to use more leverage in the crypto market, which caused me to lose more and more and more, because I was trying to recoup my losses, which was not the right thing to do at all.
We should note, Pleterski in this moment is telling a very different story than what this investigation has found so far, which is that Pleterski didn't lose investors' money. He never invested it to begin with. According to the trustee, of the money collected from investors, Pleterski's checking accounts show that only 1.6% of the funds received were actually invested, meaning that 98.4% of what Pleterski collected was never invested. He was put into bankruptcy in August 2022. If you look at his social media today and for the last few months, Pleterski is still living the high life. He says he's unemployed with an income he apparently gets from streaming videos like this. But it's unclear where that money is being kept. Is it hidden somewhere in cash or somewhere else?
In terms of him creating different ways to hide money, I can't speculate over how he's doing it, but there are ways to do it, especially if you're dealing in cryptocurrency.
The anonymity and security of crypto makes it a more challenging asset to trace than regular cash, and often harder to seize.
The difficulty is always, determining who are behind the wallets that the crypto resides in.
So again, we're dealing with a completely new financial sector, and there's a lot about this case that's new and unique that our courts are going to have to make adaptations to account for.
The trustee acknowledged some of these concerns in his most recent report, writing, Pleterski may have surplus income owing to the estate. However, this amount cannot be determined until Pleterski has filed all required income and expense statements.
Do you believe that he's hiding assets from you?
I have reason to believe that he is still hiding assets, yes.
The trustees tried at least twice now to get an arrest warrant for Pleterski to force him to cooperate, arguing that he has refused to answer questions, he's deleted data on his phone, and he's failed to show proof of any of these losses that he claims. So far, that warrant hasn't been granted. the judge saying the court does not grant warrants for the arrest, detention, and incarceration of individuals in civil matters, even when they have acted in contempt of the court's previous orders, except in very extenuating circumstances. But he said he might reconsider it if this pattern of conduct continues.
But when you have somebody who's operating a major fraud, you're not going to get their cooperation in most cases. And that's what the concern is here, because Mr. Pleterski is obviously living a somewhat affluent lifestyle.
Lack of cooperation, international travel, alleged hidden assets. These are all things criminal investigators might have more power to deal with. Because if what is being alleged here is true, that Pleterski took people's money, promised to invest it, but never actually did, and instead spent it on a slew of lavish lifestyle purchases, it sounds a lot like fraud. Police won't officially confirm whether or not a criminal investigation is underway, but so far, there have been no charges.
These fraud investigations can be quite complex. It can take a lot of resources to present the information. It can take quite a lot of investigation afterward too at the Crown's office to really understand the nature of financial flows, different kinds of financial vehicles.
Nearly half of fraud cases in Ontario for most of the last decade have ended with the charges being stayed or withdrawn. And even if it did come to pass, the charges were laid, there is no guarantee that would bring any more money back. So investors may need to brace themselves for more of this.
First swing of the day.
For now.